Welcome back, Atlanta Falcons fans. Your boy Bryce Willis back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons content. As you can see, I am joined by a special guest today, Sports Illustrated's own Falcons reporter, credited reporter, Daniel Flick is on the show. How are you doing today, sir?
Bryce, man, tired? Good, very good. Having a great Monday here. Yeah, man, ready to roll.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And one of the reasons why you're tired is because you were at the NFL Combine this past weekend, obviously. So you were there for a lot of the chatter, the workouts, guys trying to make some money this past weekend. And that's where we're going to start, man. Through the week, through the end of the week being there, is there anybody to you that maybe stood out, just any player that stood out, any particular, press conference or, interviews that you maybe did that stood out from this past weekend?
Yeah, I thought Jaden Daniels' podium availability was very good. I thought he had like a little energy to him, a little aura to him that I was like, okay, that guy's got a little bit of, he's a high character guy, high personality guy. I talked to a lot of his teammates who are very fond of him. Wrote a pretty big story on that, si.com/Falcons for all those who want to read that. But yeah, I wrote a pretty solid story about that, just about a lot of people who spent time with him, what makes him special as a leader. And you could kind of see at that podium, he's a very personable individual, and that's kind of an intimidating environment. I want to say there are probably like 60, 70 people huddled around a podium that's not very big, not a very large room there in general. And so it can be intimidating, but I thought you could kind of see that he was loose, he was confident, very comfortable in that. So he impressed me. On the field, I think Michael Penix is kind of where you got to start. Really had a very good on-field session. I also, it's funny, one of my takeaways from that week, a lot of people after Saturday watching the QBs throw, seems like JJ McCarthy had a lot of positive reviews coming out of that. I was a lot more mixed on that. He started out rough. And again, it takes time to kind of find that timing, find that rhythm. But a lot of what he was doing early was quite a bit behind a lot of the other guys who were out there throwing. And if you're going to draft a guy top 10, I think you'd like to see him be pretty clear cut the top guy early on. I didn't see that.
Yeah, and that was definitely a point of discussion, on social, because we've heard all this McCarthy hype about him being a top 10 pick. We're even hearing top 5, and this is the reason why some quarterbacks don't throw, just because these are the receivers, and so they're like, if I have a bad performance, that may look bad on me. But it seems like you said, people are like, oh my God, J.K. McCarthy, and it's like, okay, what is the infatuation here?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if people love him, every scout sees different things and they like different things, so I can't say that I know better than them. But it is interesting. But speaking of the quarterbacks, obviously, there's been a lot of rumors. There's been a lot of, speculation that came out of the combine week for the Falcons. A lot of people try to figure out what direction the Falcons going, free agency, the draft, or trade for Justin Fields. I'm sure you were there amongst the rumors. We'll start with this first. Amongst the rookie quarterbacks, do you have a preference where you would like the Falcons to go?
Like I reported, I think Jaden Daniels, from what I've heard, he is their top-ranked quarterback, and I think that from what I know of this class and from what I know of who might be there beyond pick like 1, essentially, I think Jaden's probably the guy that I would prefer them get. I think he's got the athleticism, the playmaking, and just kind of I think he's got the leadership and the character, the personality to where it's going to translate. A lot of people look at his frame and they're like, I don't know if he can last. He missed 1 game in college. He was a 5-year starter. So I think a lot of people overlook that. Obviously very productive this year, very productive last year. He's very intriguing. I think the more that I look at the class, Michael Penix, I feel like when I watch Michael Penix, the more and more that I watch him, the more intrigued I am by him. I'm not really sure I can see him becoming a highly successful NFL quarterback, but it's also at kind of the point where it's like the more I watch him, he's just really good. And there is a level of intrigue there. And I don't think he'd be in play at 8 to clear. If I'd be shocked if he was. But in a hypothetical where Atlanta moves down or he has a rough pro day and slides to round 2, that becomes kind of an intriguing option for me. But yeah, among the actual draft guys, I think one other point I want to make with McCarthy, it's funny because I talked to a lot of guys who played against a lot of the top 4 to 5 QBs in the class, and you hear a lot of them. And I kind of had a similar thing last year because I like the answers I got from that. And I thought it kind of created a pretty neat storyline. McCarthy, the first few guys that I asked, each mentioned that they went into that game wanting to make him beat them with his arm. And again, Michigan had a very good rushing attack, but if you're drafting a quarterback in the top 10, you'd like to think that they were that guy, or that they were the type of player that put legitimate fear into, whatever opponent they were facing, not the opponent was hoping to capitalize on them. And I feel like that kind of left a pretty telling indication of how McCarthy's viewed from those around him who played against him.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest things even that I heard just about JJ, because some people questioned, they're running the ball a lot in the second half, not putting it in the QB's hands. That should be a red flag. Listen, college football is weird because you can literally have an elite rushing attack and win games and pass for 100 yards. Like Iowa wins 10 games a year with no quarterback and no odds. So I mean, it's
every year,
but it makes sense. So okay, so then now I'll transition to this question about the quarterbacks. So obviously, like I said, a lot of rumors came out of it. Is there any rumor or any type of thing that has picked up steam while you were at the top? Obviously, I think on the landscape of social, it's Kirk Cousins, and the Falcons are going with veteran quarterback, and then we'll see if that means they'll draft one later. But what are you hearing from people you have talked to or just overheard?
Yeah, what I've heard, I heard this earlier in the week, around Tuesday, Wednesday, ended up mirroring what a lot of other people were reporting on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, throughout the rest of the weekend, is that Atlanta and Chicago have had talks about Fields. Atlanta and Chicago met early in Indianapolis, presumably on Fields. But then the more that the week played out, there was more buzz around Atlanta and Kirk Cousins. To me, I think that's you're kind of starting to see that pick up around the league right now. I think Atlanta wanted to really dig deep on Fields, and I do think there's a level of interest there. I don't think it's as great as it is in Kirk Cousins right now. And so with where the Falcons are at, with where Raheem Morris mentioned they have competitive urgency right now with the roster that they have, the pieces that they have. He's very fond of the pieces that are there currently. I said a lot. They really feel like they're a quarterback away from being legitimately in contention here. And whether Kirk Cousins is that guy who can take them to legitimate contention or just playoff team, that's up for them to figure out. But it's, you look at what he's done, his career, the caliber of passer that he is, you insert him. I mean, Atlanta's won 7 games each of the last 2 years with very subpar quarterback play. I think you add Kirk Cousins into that mix, you're looking at least a 3-win improvement, at least on paper. And that's probably enough, to end that 6-year, 7-year playoff drought. So there is interest there in Kirk Cousins from what I know.
Yeah, I think some people, I think Kirk Cousins is not the popular option. I think because he's coming off an Achilles and people, and this is something I also have a concern with. Like Kirk, I feel like we will be a winning team. I think he's won with Minnesota. Like he's had 1 games. That's not my concern.
Yeah.
My concern is, playoffs. If we're trying to be a Super Bowl team, do we think Kirk Cousins is good enough because he hasn't necessarily shown in his career yet? So it'll be interesting to see what that turns into for Atlanta, I think. But, we'll see what actually happens so when it gets there. Because like I said, a lot of rumors right now.
Yeah, man, it's hard to kind of sort through it all, too, because you do hear a lot. And you see a lot from what you hear, and you hear a lot from what other people are hearing, and you kind of start putting it together, and it's like, oh, okay. Then I I feel quite confident in saying that from what I've heard, from what I know, that they a lot more of the buzz, I can safely say, is around Atlanta and Kirk Cousins for now. Anyways, for now, it's always open to change. But at least in Indianapolis, which is obviously a hot spot for talks around the league and kind of receiving a pulse of where people think teams are, I think that's where a lot of people think Atlanta's trying to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes a ton of sense. So back to Combine. One of the main other positions the Falcons are in need of are, basically needing to kind of revamp the receiving core. And this draft has a lot of strong receivers. Tell me a guy that maybe stood out to you this weekend you think could be a good fit. I think a lot of people made some money. Obviously, Xavier Worthy broke the 40-yard dash record. Any of those guys you feel like, or that you've seen that's like, oh, yeah, he would be great if the Falcons could get him potentially?
Yeah, I think Jermaine Burton had a very good workout. The more that I was watching, the more I watched the receivers work out, I was like, wow, he actually looks really good. Obviously started his career in Athens, went to Alabama. His college career was kind of up and down at various points, and I'm not sure he's the most popular player in the state of Georgia. But he had a very impressive on-field workout to me. A few other names I kind of want to mention. Malik Washington from Virginia, undersized, but ran a 4.47 from Atlanta. Or sorry, he's from Georgia, Marietta, I believe. And I remember I asked him Friday about playing at home, and you hear a lot of different answers about that, because I like asking players from the state about that and hearing what they have to say. And he was the first player I have ever had tell me they wanted to start something in their community and start something where they're helping underprivileged youth and using their platform in that light. And that stood out to me. I thought that was really neat. I thought that was a very, very cool deal. And then he is a smooth football player, probably more of a slot type of guy, but Atlanta has a need in that area anyways. I think AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, the guys that ran fast, Atlanta really needs a number 2 receiver who can run. And I feel like that was, when you look at Arthur Smith's time in Atlanta, that's really where he got into trouble. It's you have these high caliber players who are big bodied, the basketball team, as everybody called it, right? They had pieces who were fast around them, but they were pieces who were only vertical threats. You think about like a Scotty Miller, guys like that. That's just, when he's out there, he's a vertical guy. A Demir Bird, for example. There was guys in that light who were, you put them out there and it's just like, they're not going to be able to really beat you with a whole lot of route nuance. It's more just their vertical presence. If you can add a number 2 who can run routes and who can stretch you vertically, that's where you start to get into, I think that's where that offense reaches a new level. AD Mitchell seemed to really enjoy his meeting with the Falcons as well in Atlanta, or in Indianapolis, I should say. He was asked about it. He started, he said it was really good. And then he started laughing a little bit, smiling. I think he really enjoyed that meeting. So that would be an interesting one. Obviously, a lot of people in the state of Georgia are still pretty fond of him, from my understanding, from his time in Athens as well. So I think that'd be kind of an interesting fit.
Well, what do you think about Ladd McConkey?
Yeah, Ladd McConkey, I saw some of the interesting comparisons that have come out about him since his on-field workout and since he started the test. I've seen like Chris Olave. I think I saw Olave. I saw Wilson from the Jets. I like the numbers the numbers between those two are very similar. It's kind of unbelievable. But yeah, McConkey, very similar to kind of what I'm saying here, is about how he can win vertically, but also incredible separator. Very tough. I think it was interesting hearing his podium. I think it'd be easy for him to kind of come out of UGA with what he did and the type of athlete he is and be, a little bit full of himself. He had a really refreshing sense of humility that I appreciated hearing him talk. And, he's pretty confident he can play inside, outside, I think. And I think he'd be a very interesting fit in Atlanta. I think he's a guy that you could use obviously you saw the Rams offense that has historically thrived on some guys who are built similar to him, have similar athletic profiles to him. I think about Cup. I think about Robert Woods. I think about a lot of guys who are kind of in that similar mold. And so I think with Zach Robinson, I think Ladd McConkey could be a great fit. And I also feel very confident in saying he would be the most popular Falcons draft pick in a very, very long time.
Yeah. They've been dying for him to draft Georgia players. Fans have been dying for him to draft Georgia players for a while.
The year they did it, they weren't happy with the 2 they drafted either.
So that's definitely true. That's definitely true. Now, one thing I want to touch on is it seemed like a lot of the players that have talked to the Falcons all were very positive, glowing. They really enjoyed talking to Raheem. They really enjoyed, mingling with the staff. All the quarterbacks, Caleb said, if they trade me, I'm there. Drake said that was the first team I think he said he met with. Jaden was very high on them. Can you maybe talk about that? Raheem Morris has been known as a guy who is just a very great connector with the players. And maybe we're seeing the impact of that with just guys that we may not be on the Falcons, but he's just being able to maybe get in contact with this past week. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, historically, I'm not sure I've ever heard a player come out and say he had a bad combine meeting with a team. So that's part of it too. A lot of people said very complimentary things about Arthur Smith last year and that staff, and they enjoyed meeting the staff then. So that part of it, I tend to take more note in when you have players who are saying, like name dropping people, like May mentioned Raheem, he mentioned TJ Yates. I took note in that because these guys meet with so many people. If you're remembering the names, remembering the faces that you're seeing, I tend to think that shows that it actually was a quality meeting. They talked about quality things. But yeah, Raheem has so much energy to him, and that's just one thing you see when you're around him and how he interacts with people. He truly is so joyful, and in those types of atmospheres, when these guys are seeing, all these prospects are seeing however many teams, and the combine week in general, for as busy and tired as I was and I am, I assure you it's probably tenfold for them. I know some of those teams have pro days this week too, which I mean, that's just brutal for them. But it's I think the chance to be around somebody like Raheem, like Terry Fontenot, because again, I think of Terry in a very similar light. He is an outstanding individual, very, very good individual person. And so I tend to think that it's the type of deal where you get around these guys and you see how genuine they are, you see how energetic they are. I know Michael Penix said that they asked him pretty tough questions. I just about his injuries. He mentioned that for another team as well. So they are asking legitimate questions. A lot of the guys they talked to, they just ran through film, some kind of I'd say like character checks as well, kind of just trying to understand who they are as people, and then it progressed more into film and talking about things of that nature. So they had a productive week there. Yeah, the overall feeling though I got from people who met with Atlanta, just very, very fond of the staff, just in general, very high character staff. And again, that kind of matches with everything that I've seen out of them too in my personal interactions with them.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, it's, we usually do get, like you said, positive, comments from guys. I still remember, because sometimes you'll get it like after the words, like, yeah, they asked me this weird question. You never know you're going to be that team. If somebody comes in, he asked me this weird question, like Arthur Smith. I don't know if you remember the Arthur Smith one. I think offensive lineman. I can't remember. They said he asked like a super weird, like he didn't ask a weird question, but he asked like some question that he was just like, that was just interesting to ask. So, that's why I just didn't know if like, anything crazy happens, because this is the weekend where that happens.
Did not hear any about that. Not hear any about it. Which is kind of a bummer, actually. I was kind of hoping I heard something about that, because I heard some last year. There was I want to say the Falcons had a mini hoop. The Falcons had like a mini hoop in there, and a lot of teams you'd see now have that. They'll have like a putt thing, or they'll have like players shoot free throws. Did not hear about any of that with Atlanta. It seemed like it was all business, which I was kind of like, man, because it's such a great story to find that and hear some of that. But no, I don't think there was anything too fun about the Raheem Morris year one combine experience.
Good. I got you, man. I got two more questions for you, man. Then I'll let you go. Next question. This is more like free agency trade talk. But Darius Sneed, Kansas City Chiefs corner, someone who has been connected to the Falcons in rumors. Did you hear anything about that potentially this weekend? Because I know people are trying to connect Snead. I didn't know if like that was discussed at all, just about who could be interested in him or anything to that at all.
Did not hear much about Snead. No, I do want to point this out about that though. The guy who reported that, I think it was Tony Pauline,
Yeah,
also reported this week about Atlanta being close to trading with Fields and that being the buzz, and that really just was not the buzz. So, I do trust Pauline on a broader scale, but I think his Falcons credibility took a little bit of a hit this week. But yeah, no, Snead. Did not hear much on that front. I do think when you look at Atlanta, though, they interviewed a lot of the draft's top corners, and I'm curious to see how they end up perceiving Clark Phillips if they want to play him more inside. Because if they do, with Alford entering the last year of his contract as well, the Falcons have a very big long-term need on the outside, and potentially even a short-term need if they view Clark Phillips as an inside guy. So. Snead, again, I believe it sounds like the Chiefs are going to tag him. Sounds like it'll be a trade acquisition for Atlanta. We'll see how that ends up going. But I do see the need there. I see the fit there, but did not hear any particular buzz on that front.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to check. I know Tony has a bit of a, like you said, broader scale, but nothing, with Falcons. So that's why I was just like, didn't know if you particularly heard anything there. But yeah, I mean, because, corner is going to be an interesting position, like you said, with Clark Phillips. Trying to figure out what he does with him. I don't know if that still was the case. I think the highest 40 ran was from, Wiggins from Clemson. I don't know if that actually remained the same, but yeah. So, I mean, I know that may be somebody to look at. I know you said they talked to some back people, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, they did meet with Wiggins, who is an Atlanta native who trained with AJ Terrell. Very smooth corner. He liked his meeting too. He liked that one. He's very fond of returning to Atlanta. So, I think Kamari Lassiter would be an interesting one. On the topic of Kamari Lassiter, Ladd McConkey, I thought this was very interesting. Ladd said that Kamari Lassiter is the toughest player he faced in practice at Georgia. Among all of the guys that he faced, it was Lassiter. And you think about him probably going to be more of a round 2 guy. Assuming Atlanta ends up keeping its round 2 pick and isn't involved in a trade maneuver variety, I think Lassiter would be I think corner round 2 is a very realistic possibility. So we'll see how that goes, but I think he'd be a very interesting round 2 fit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's where they go, especially because we're waiting on the Calvin Ridley resign. They could get an extra second because of that, and then maybe that is definitely a player they could look at bringing in and maybe putting at that outside if needed. Depending on what happens. So my last question to you, sir, is, so again, after everything that has transpired from the combine, what, and the free agency is like next week, tampering period, I believe, is next Monday.
Yep.
What, just, and maybe your gut feeling, what do you think is going to be the big potential move the Falcons make during the free agency? Obviously, there are some pass rushers available. We haven't heard much buzz about it, but I don't know if that's something they're trying to target. Obviously, if they go get Kirk Cousins, that 8th pick becomes maybe a potential pass rush pick. And then obviously, like I said, we still have the trade rumors with Justin Fields. See if there's anything happens with Ladarius Sneed. Is there anything that you think that, like, hey, watch out for this? This could be a potential target, or something surprising, or just something that is just like, hey, what's been reported? This is probably what I expect to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and kind of take the cop-out answer here and say the quarterback position, that whatever happens there, Atlanta will be heavily, heavily involved. I still think Kirk Cousins is going to be the most important name of the entire offseason for Atlanta. Because at the end of the day, this is what Raheem Morris was saying on Tuesday. I think Terry said very similar things as well, is that they do have, with the way the NFL timeline works, they don't have much time here. Like they need to make a decision here soon about the avenue that they'll end up pursuing. The time is now for that. The time is now, and they're gonna, whatever ends up happening with Cousins will ultimately determine what happens thereafter. I do think they want to try to sign him. I think the Vikings want to try to sign him. I think there are probably a few other teams in the NFL that want to try to sign him. There's a lot of interest there. Atlanta being among the teams who is very interested in him. And so, again, everybody knows about him, and I think that's an important. I still think it's an important thing to realize, though, that that what happens with Kirk Cousins, not only, in my opinion, not only determines Atlanta's 2024 Week 1 starting QB, but could potentially determine the long-term future under center for Atlanta. Really, because if they end up missing on Cousins, maybe they trade for Fields. What if he ends up becoming the player a lot of people thought he could be out of Ohio State and flashed at times at Chicago? What if he ends up not being that guy and Atlanta's back in the same position again next year? What if they are out on Fields entirely and they end up drafting a quarterback who at 8, or they trade up, they sell the farm, and the quarterback becomes, the savior under center, or becomes a bust and you're back in this position again in 2025 or 3 years from now, 2026, 27, whenever it may be. So that all those dominoes, to me, the very first domino that needs to fall is probably Kirk Cousins. And I think that's Atlanta would like Kirk Cousins, I think, and Atlanta is going to try to get Kirk Cousins. And I think what happens there will ultimately determine really the way the rest of the offseason plays out.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'll be interested to definitely keep an eye on, man, because, these rumors are going to keep running roughshod. But luckily, like I said, we're getting closer to around that time when we know what they're going to do in the direction of this team moving forward under Raheem and Terry's guidance. So appreciate you, Dave, for coming on to the show, man. Definitely taking that time out of your busy schedule to talk some Falcons with me, man. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, Twitter @ByDanielFlick, SI.com/NFL/Falcons for all of my coverage, all my stories. I really appreciate you having me on, Bryce. I'm always happy to join. Always enjoyed chopping it up with you, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I always enjoy chopping it up with you, man, too. So, yeah, guys, we're going to have to see what happens with the Falcons moving forward. And it's going to be interesting. Very interesting offseason, I would say, at least. But that's Daniel Flick. I'm Bryce Lewis. See you next time.